is this very conversation we're having right now part of the media industry overly picking apart everything that women do?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think that it's important to be critical about these sorts of things, especially when you think even back to like, for instance, like the early 2000s pop stars, where it was just a given that there would be these like hypersexualized images of these like teeny pop stars. And so it is kind of cool that as a culture, we're like, oh, maybe this isn't what we want. You know what I mean? I've seen a lot of comparisons online that say that Sabrina Carpenter is going to end up like Miley Cyrus in a couple of years.
Whoa.
And that's even an interesting conversation because I think it assumes that what happened or what Miley Cyrus did was inherently wrong or incorrect. And there's a lot of conversations back when she was going through that Robin Thicke phase about whether she was reclaiming her sexuality or if she was just being whatever else you want to call it. It's just so hard because, I mean, even the argument of like, oh, reclaiming her sexuality and like, you know, her expression of that, it's just, it still feels like it's centering men. Yeah. Right. And I think if that weren't the case, it would be easier to make that argument, or that argument would hold more water. Right. But it's like, how are you reclaiming your sexuality as your own when in a way you're still centering the male gaze and male fantasies? And like, maybe it's like, and I don't think that those things necessarily have to be inextricably
isn't that just a hetero?
linked.
That's just a result of her being heteronormative, right? Like that's not, she likes men. So if she's reclaiming her sexuality, it's through the paradigm and lens of who she's sexually attracted to and desires to be sexually attracted by, if what I'm saying makes sense. Like when I do things because I care what women think. In the advancement and the evolution of my sexuality, all my decisions were women-based. I didn't care what the guys thought.
Right.
When I started wearing jeans that fit and my friends were still wearing baggy jeans, it's because women said I like the jeans that fit. I'm like, really? I don't think that that's wrong because you're engaging in the area that you're attracted to and desiring to be attracted by. Yeah. I mean, again, going with online discourse, people, I think before the cover would talk a lot about how Sabrina was for the female gaze and now she's catering the male gaze. And I find that conversation difficult because I don't think you can cater who is gazing at you. Correct. Like you can, obviously the male gaze, when we talk about a man, for example, a man making a film and portraying a woman in a certain way because that's the way that he wants to see her, that's problematic. But if you're Sabrina Carpenter and you wear a tight bodysuit at a show that makes you look good, you can't control who looks at you. There's going to be lots of people who look at you. So who is that? Empowering, or is that catering to the male gaze? What is that? So I think those conversations are complicated.
Yeah,
it's hard to get when you're not the creator of the art. Yeah, I've always understood the gaze when we talk about the obviously the concept of the gaze I understood politically. Yeah. Okay. So when I first came across the gaze, it wasn't artistic. It wasn't through an artistic. It was through a political lens. So and what it was saying is that no matter what, everybody is bringing their perception to what they're looking at. Right. And they are applying that to the object. How did that transition to film? Okay, great. So when you shoot a love scene, for example, in a film, you're very careful as a male director, depending on what you're trying to convey, to have women talk to you. Because you're kind of subject to what you think you're seeing. So then the camera's doing what you think. So then you try and neutralize that, right? Photography, I'm assuming it's the same thing. But I don't disagree with him. Men are still going to look and see what they want to see from whatever it is you show them.
Right.
I remember that conversation with Blue is the Warmest Color. Blue is the Warmest Color was a film where the two women were same-sex attracted. And there was a sex scene in there. I mean, the thing was like 15 minutes long. I thought it was crazy. And the thing was getting loved. It's so tastefully approached. And
what? I thought there were people that were literally like, this is disgusting.
Okay, maybe.
He's a perv.
I should have been in that part of the internet.
Was that directed by a man?
I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah, it was. And apparently he created
wild.
like a really awful, hostile environment on set. And there was like a lot of controversy over that sex scene and people thinking that it wasn't like an accurate portrayal of like lesbian sex and that it was like just a man getting his rocks off.
Okay, see, and I remember I had a problem with that, but at the time that the movie came out, I don't remember that being, because it was winning awards and stuff.
I remember the discourse of Blue is the Warmest Color being like, this is like such a great representation of queer love. And
yeah, it was directed by a man, just to confirm.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to go
back.
Maybe
it's also like a generational thing. Like by the time I was aware of the movie and watching it, people had maybe picked it apart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But I remember watching it and I'm like, I don't know what people are talking about. I'm uncomfortable. Like this, it did feel like what you're saying. But at the time, people were like, no. But again, people bring to it what they...
Yeah.
I think that's just a measure of people are bringing to it what they're bringing to it.
Right. I mean, I guess even with this now, like people having their reactions to it, and I guess that's the point of good art, is it's supposed to make you feel something, and you don't necessarily have to agree with her artistic choices, but...
Yeah, I don't know what the crossover is between good art and rage bait, because both of those things elicit strong responses.
Yeah.
Just because you react to it doesn't mean that it's art. It could just be something designed to make you angry.
Right. And I guess it's like going back to that thing about who's the target, like who is it for? You know, like...
Everybody. But you bring to it what you bring to it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I think that's the idea of art. Art is for everyone, but your relationship with the art that's what makes it so beautiful. It's because you have your own life experience and you've brought to it your own baggage that is forcing you to interact with this in a specific way.
But going back to the album cover and the prompt, I remember like it took me a bit of reading online to sort of understand what everyone was mad about. But my initial reaction when I saw it and saw how upset people were was like, yeah, well, you know, she's becoming the biggest female pop star in the world. Of course, people are trying to find a reason.
Yeah, but
like, of course they're trying to tear her down because she's
right.
I don't see that as a woman thing. I get where you're going with the prompt, which is like, are we as a society just overcritical of women? Do we just always have something to say about women and their bodies? Are we always saying, why is a woman doing this? Yes, yes, we do. But I don't think this is one of those instances. I think this is an instance where one of the largest pop stars in the world has done something. We're talking about it.
I don't think it's being overly critical of Sabrina Carpenter. I think it more so speaks to the importance of needing to be critical of this type of imagery.
Fair.
Because of what it reinforces.
So are you saying there's no place for pornographic imagery in the world?
I'm saying that as a woman, I feel that type of imagery and it becoming more mainstream and like digestible in culture is harmful to me, because a woman on all fours with a man standing over her with a fistful of her hair is not...
Normalizing that is a problem for you.
I think normalizing that is definitely a problem.
Because you don't think it comes with the context of choice or non-choice, agency or non-agency.
It doesn't come with the context of choice or non-choice. And I think none of these things exist in a vacuum. And again, thinking about of just like where we are societally, where questions of like bodily autonomy and agency loom large, you don't need this type of imagery being pedestaled as the expression of female sexuality and empowerment. Do you know what I mean? It's
such a fair point.
People have the choice to engage in their sexuality however they choose, and that's great. But I think it's also important to have that counterbalance of like, yeah, that's so fine if you're into that, but that's not empowerment. That's not like the pinnacle of like womanhood and like sexual agency.
It's a really good point. I don't even want to undercut that. That's a good point.
You know?
Because I can't speak to what makes you feel safe or unsafe as a woman in these spaces. And I also won't be ignorant to the fact that an image like this and images like this getting normalized, I do see the link of how it creates a more dangerous world.
100%. And I mean, even just, I remember in a class once we were taught, it was a feminist philosophy class, and we were just talking about like porn and how the porn industry has normalized really like violent sex, I guess, if we're thinking like heteronormative here, and how she was like, took a survey of this class of like, I don't know, 18 to 22-year-olds. And these girls were talking about how like they were having sex where it was normal to be choked and spanked and these like kind of violent things that are now just like, that's what's on the menu, you know? And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that porn is so easily accessible and we are consuming this type of content and becoming increasingly desensitized.
Okay. I'm going to enter the realm here.
Okay.
Sexually reclusive societies also create, and I would argue might create more dangerous experiences for women. So I say this as the sheltered kid growing up, you know what I mean? Like we grew up in the same house. There was none of those. Like I didn't understand what the hell was going on. I got to college, I'm like, what are you guys talking about? But you do sometimes have to demystify these things too, to create an avenue where people can talk about them so that they don't abuse them.
For sure, but I don't think it's either or. Like, I think there's a way of normalizing sex and healthy sexuality that isn't like, okay, for example, like talking about like BDSM,
Sure.
which at one point was this like fringe sort of subculture.
Sure.
And now it's becoming increasingly more mainstream.
Sure.
But I think that like, especially as like young people exploring sex and sexuality, maybe it's harmful to sort of just like dive headfirst into.
I don't think anybody joins the
more
sex game and
extreme.
starts with the BDSM right away.
But that's what I'm saying though. Because of porn and like learning sex
I
and
get it.
sexuality
Okay.
from porn, where you're watching performers
You
and
hop in and you're
actors.
immediately performative is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay. So you don't get to ease your way in.
Well, I think not to say that porn is good or bad, but like the distinction too is that most porn is mass produced by men through this very specific male perspective.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if porn were perhaps produced more by women or by just people of other backgrounds and other viewpoints, you might end up with a healthier representation of sex from that. But you're right. Like, I think the statistic is people who grow up in repressed households or are like 70% more likely to become addicted to porn than people who aren't.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a balance between exposing.
Because the total absence of it makes it weird. Like I've seen the guys who I see that they've never had the conversations. It's always been taboo. You never talk about it. When they finally do tell you a story, it sounds like you should call somebody.
Yeah, they go crazy.
It sounds like you should call somebody.
The number of like repressed Christian kids I've seen who go to college and just go insane.
Oh,
it's the Christian guy. Like oh man, we all went to the same church, but it's those guys who, you know, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, no, the Lord, virginity, abstinent, no, I'm never taught you. Porn, no, halal. And then 18, 19, 20 in college.
Right.
You don't want to ease your way into that bubble?
Right,
Like that sounds like you lost it.
Right.
Then, whereas, and again, it's a personal experience, then the juxtapose of the 12, 13, 14, it's like this, like, the experience, I had a boyfriend, we kissed, and this slow increase. It just felt so much more like a consensual and measured and like a delicate dipping of the, like a slow wading of waters into a pool, as opposed to a guy or woman gets to 18 or 19. They feel like they're so behind all of their friends because from 12, 13, they didn't do anything. And now because they want to be cool and think they want to catch up, they're hanging from a chandelier. Like it felt like that. It felt like, you know, so I don't know.
No, I think there's definitely a middle ground. And I think especially in the context of young people, it's like maybe having more conversations around consent and desire would be helpful than, you know.
But then going back to the prompt, images like this, conversations around it help the foundations of those type of conversations too, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, if you're talking about power and context, like Sabrina Carpenter at least projects that she's in the position to choose men carefully and have her desires satisfied in the way that she wants. But there's lots of women who are also dragged by the hair when they don't want to be. And so it's interesting, like it could be, you know, sort of an expression of what she wants, but it doesn't necessarily represent that for
a lot of other women.
Yeah, a lot of other women.
Right.